My name is Amanda, and at 32 years old, I thought I understood what it meant to be part of a family. As a high school teacher married to Derek, an emergency room nurse, we had spent over a year planning our dream anniversary trip to Hawaii. 5 years of marriage deserved a celebration, especially since we never had a proper honeymoon. Then my sister Rebecca, mother of 3 young children, made a demand that threatened everything we had worked for. Before I dive into what happened, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below and hit subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when family crosses the line. Derek and I met during my final year of college when he was in nursing school. Our connection was immediate and profound, the kind you read about but rarely experience. His compassion as an emergency room nurse matched my passion as a high school English teacher. We both poured our hearts into careers that demanded much but gave back even more. The downside was our limited vacation time, making any trip we planned precious and rare. Our Hawaii trip represented so much more than just a vacation. When we married 5 years ago, we were both drowning in student loans and starting our careers. Our wedding was small, held in my parents' backyard, and our honeymoon consisted of a weekend at a bed and breakfast 2 hours away. We promised each other that for our 5th anniversary, we would have the honeymoon we deserved. Hawaii was our dream destination, with its pristine beaches, lush mountains, and romantic sunsets. For 12 months, we put aside every spare dollar. We skipped eating out, passed on new clothes, and I took on extra tutoring jobs after school. Derek worked extra shifts on holidays when the pay was higher. We researched the best deals, booked flights 11 months in advance, and paid non-refundable deposits for activities like snorkeling at Molokini Crater and a sunset dinner cruise. This trip represented not just our anniversary, but our triumph over the financial struggles that had marked the early years of our marriage. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. My report cards were perfect, my room was tidy, and I never missed curfew. My parents, Thomas and Margaret, praised my reliability but also came to expect it. My sister Rebecca, 3 years younger, took a different path. While not a bad person, she approached life with a spontaneity that often bordered on chaos. She dropped out of college twice, cycled through jobs, and had 3 children with 2 different men, neither of whom remained consistently in the picture. The pattern was established early. Rebecca would make impulsive decisions, face the consequences, and the family would mobilize to help her. My father, a retired military officer, criticized her choices, but always came to her rescue. My mother, the eternal peacekeeper, would smooth things over and remind everyone that family sticks together. And I, the reliable older sister, would step in to babysit, loan money, or provide emotional support. Rebecca had 3 wonderful children who deserved stability: Jacob, 7, Emma, 5, and Lily, 3. I loved being their aunt and never complained about watching them. Birthday parties, school performances, soccer games, I attended them all. Sometimes I felt more like a co-parent than an aunt, especially when Rebecca would drop them off last minute because she had forgotten about a social engagement or needed a mental health day. In the last year, however, I had been working on establishing healthier boundaries. My therapist helped me see that my relationship with Derek deserved the same priority as my family obligations. Derek never complained, but I knew he sometimes felt like my family took precedence over our marriage. We needed this trip not just for relaxation, but to reconnect and center ourselves as a couple. Our life was finally coming into balance. Derek had recently been promoted to charge nurse, and I was being considered for the English department head position. We had paid off our student loans and started saving for a house. The Hawaii trip was the exclamation point on this chapter of our lives, a reward for all our hard work and a foundation for our future together. Little did I know that 2 weeks before our departure date, the delicate balance I had worked so hard to achieve would be completely upended by a single phone call from my sister. The call came on a Tuesday evening as Derek and I were reviewing our packing list for Hawaii. My phone lit up with Rebecca's name, and I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail. We still had to confirm our airport shuttle and print boarding passes. But old habits die hard, so I answered. Amanda, thank God you picked up, Rebecca said. Her voice pitched with that familiar urgency that usually preceded a request. I need a huge favor, and you are the only one who can help me. I felt my stomach tighten as I put the phone on speaker so Derek could hear. What's going on, Becca? I just got the most amazing opportunity for a job interview in Denver. It's with this marketing firm that could totally change my life. Great salary, benefits, everything the kids and I need. That's wonderful, I said cautiously. When is the interview? There was a brief pause. Next week. I need to fly out Monday and won't be back until Sunday. That's why I need you to watch the kids. The dates registered immediately. Our flight to Hawaii was scheduled for next Wednesday. Rebecca, you know Derek and I are leaving for Hawaii next week. We have been planning this trip for a year. I know, she said quickly. But this is an emergency. This job could change everything for me and the kids. You guys can go to Hawaii anytime. This interview is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I looked at Derek, whose face had already fallen in anticipation of what was coming. We can't reschedule, Rebecca. We have non-refundable deposits, time off approved that was difficult to get, everything is set. Can Mom and Dad help? Or what about Jason's parents? Jason was Emma's father, who occasionally took the children for weekends. Mom and Dad are visiting Uncle Steve in Florida, you know that. And Jason's parents are too old to handle all 3 kids for a week. Listen, Amanda, this is just a vacation. This is my entire future we are talking about. It's not just a vacation, I said, my voice tightening. It's our 5th anniversary trip that we've been saving for and planning for over a year. It's important to us. More important than your nieces and nephews? More important than me getting a job that could give them a stable life. Her voice rose accusingly. That's not fair, I said. What about a professional sitter? Or one of your friends? Sarah has kids the same age, can't she help? A professional sitter for a week would cost thousands. And Sarah is dealing with her own stuff right now. Amanda, you're being ridiculous. You can go to Hawaii anytime. The kids know you, they love you. Please don't make this difficult. Derek squeezed my hand supportively as I took a deep breath. I'm sorry, Rebecca, but we can't cancel our trip. We might be able to help for a day before we leave, but that's it. What followed was a tirade about my selfishness, my lack of family loyalty, and how I always thought my life was more important than hers. She brought up every time she had felt second best growing up, how our parents had favored me, and how this was just another example of me not caring about her needs. Fine, she finally said. If that's how you want to be. But don't expect me to forget this. I'm calling Mom and Dad, and they can deal with you. She hung up before I could respond. Derek pulled me into a hug as I fought back tears. You did the right thing, he whispered. We deserve this trip. I know, I said. But she knows exactly how to make me feel horrible. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the kids and how they needed stability. But I also thought about all the times Rebecca had used them as leverage to get what she wanted from the family. The next morning, I saw Rebecca had already taken to social media, posting vague statements about how sad it was when family lets you down when you need them most. Several mutual friends and extended family members had commented, asking what was wrong and offering support. The stress affected my work. I stumbled through my lessons that day, losing my train of thought and snapping at students who weren't paying attention. During my lunch break, I called my mother in Florida, hoping to get ahead of Rebecca's version of events. But she had already heard from my sister. Amanda, I'm disappointed, Mom said. Your sister really needs this opportunity. I tried to explain about the trip, the planning, the non-refundable deposits, but Mom wasn't really listening. She was too focused on how Rebecca needed this job and how the kids needed care. By the time I hung up, I felt like I was 12 years old again, being told to share my toys with my sister even though she had broken the last ones I'd shared. As the day progressed, more messages rolled in. My Aunt Linda texted that family should always come first. My cousin Patrick suggested we could surely find another week for a beach vacation. None of them seemed to understand or care about the significance of this trip or the fact that Rebecca had known about it for months. By the time I got home that evening, I was emotionally exhausted. Derek had brought home takeout and a bottle of wine, sensing I would need comfort. As we sat on the couch, my phone continued to buzz with messages from family members, each one a fresh wave of guilt and pressure. Maybe we should just cancel, I said weakly, hating myself for even suggesting it. Derek took my hands in his. Amanda, I love you. And I love your family. But this is a pattern. If we cancel this trip, we are sending the message that our plans, our marriage, will always take a back seat to your sister's emergencies. There will always be another crisis, another reason why we need to drop everything to help her. Deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't just about a vacation. It was about whether Derek and I had the right to prioritize our marriage, even when it conflicted with my family's expectations. You're right, I said finally. We're going to Hawaii. The decision was made, but the battle had just begun. The next morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was my mother, calling from Florida, her voice tense with disapproval. Amanda, I've been thinking about this situation all night. I'm very disappointed in your attitude. Family comes first, always. That's how your father and I raised you. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep my voice down so Derek could sleep a little longer before his 12-hour shift. Mom, we've been planning this trip for a year. Rebecca has known about it for months. Why is this job interview suddenly scheduled during the exact week we're gone? Sometimes opportunities come when we least expect them, she replied, dismissing my concern. You need to be flexible. When you have children of your own someday, you'll understand that their needs come before vacations. Her words stung on multiple levels. Derek and I had been trying for a baby for 2 years without success, something my mother knew but conveniently forgot whenever it suited her argument. And she was reducing our carefully planned anniversary trip to a frivolous vacation, as if we were just being selfish. Mom, this isn't just about the trip. It's about Rebecca always expecting everyone to rearrange their lives whenever she has a crisis. She needs to learn to plan ahead and find reliable childcare that doesn't involve disrupting everyone else's plans. I can't believe how cold you're being, Mom said. Those children are your flesh and blood. What kind of aunt refuses to help when they need her? After 20 minutes of circular arguments, I finally ended the call, promising to think about it, just to get her off the phone. But the reprieve was short-lived. That evening, my father called. Amanda, he began, his military background evident in his clipped tone. Your mother tells me you're refusing to help your sister in her time of need. Dad, it's not that simple. We've had this trip planned for a year. We can't just cancel it. When I was in the service, he continued as if I hadn't spoken, we learned that the mission comes first. Family is your mission, Amanda. Everything else is secondary. But Dad, doesn't that apply to my marriage too? Isn't Derek my family? Of course he is, but he should understand the importance of helping your sister advance her career. This job could change her life. Give those kids the stability they deserve. Surely a week in Hawaii can wait. No matter how I tried to explain our perspective, my father saw our refusal as a character flaw, a sign that I had become selfish and forgotten the values they had instilled in me. By the time we hung up, I was shaking with frustration. The next day, the extended family joined in. Aunt Linda called, Uncle Robert texted, and even my cousin Jennifer, who I hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly had an opinion about my obligation to Rebecca. Each conversation followed the same pattern, initial sympathy for my predicament followed by the clear expectation that I would eventually do the right thing and cancel our trip. The family group chat became a forum for passive-aggressive comments about the importance of being there for family. Nobody directly addressed me, but the subtext was clear. So blessed to have a sister who would drop everything to help me, my cousin Megan wrote, accompanied by a photo of her and her sister. Family first, always and forever, my uncle posted, garnering a dozen heart reactions. The pressure wasn't just coming from direct conversations. Rebecca had apparently shared her version of events with everyone she knew. I received a text from Emma's teacher expressing concern that Emma had been upset at school because Aunt Amanda doesn't want to see us next week. A mutual friend messaged me asking if everything was okay because Rebecca seemed really stressed about childcare. Every day brought new tactics. My mother called with reports that Rebecca was having anxiety attacks over the situation. My father sent articles about the importance of family support networks. Aunt Linda suggested that perhaps Derek could go to Hawaii alone while I stayed with the children, completely missing the point that this was our anniversary trip. The constant barrage took its toll. I developed insomnia, lying awake at night replaying conversations and imagining worst-case scenarios. My stomach was in knots, and I found myself avoiding meals. At school, I struggled to focus on my students, my mind constantly wandering to the family drama. Derek witnessed all of this with growing concern. One night, after I spent an hour on the phone with my mother only to end up in tears again, he gently took the phone from my hand. "This has to stop," he said firmly. "They're wearing you down deliberately. They're hoping if they apply enough pressure, you'll give in just to make it stop." "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, wiping my eyes. "They're my family. We're going to set a boundary," he said. "Block their numbers until after the trip. We'll send one email explaining that we're not changing our plans, and then we're going to focus on our anniversary." The thought of cutting off communication was terrifying. What if there was a real emergency? What if this permanently damaged my relationship with my family? But the alternative seemed worse. Continuing to absorb their disapproval and manipulation until I was too emotionally exhausted to enjoy the trip we had worked so hard for. That night, I drafted an email with Derek's help. It was respectful but firm. We were not canceling our trip. We loved Rebecca and the kids, but this last-minute request was not something we could accommodate. We suggested some alternative childcare options and attached a list of professional sitter services. We would be limiting our phone communication until after our return to focus on our anniversary celebration. After sending it, I blocked the family group chat and set my phone to send all calls from family members directly to voicemail. It felt both liberating and terrifying, like jumping off a cliff and not knowing how deep the water below might be. The next day, I had a session with my therapist, Dr. Matthews. I explained the situation, half expecting her to tell me I was being selfish. "Amanda," she said after listening carefully, "what would you tell one of your students if they came to you with this exact situation?" I thought about it. I'd tell them they have the right to set boundaries, even with family. Especially with family. Exactly, she nodded. Healthy relationships require respect for each other's boundaries. Your sister and parents are not respecting yours. Standing firm doesn't make you a bad daughter, sister, or aunt. It makes you a healthy adult with appropriate boundaries. Her validation helped, but the guilt and anxiety remained. As our departure date grew closer, the voicemails piled up. I didn't listen to them, but their presence on my phone felt like tiny weights, accumulating into a burden I carried everywhere. 2 days before our flight, a package arrived from my parents. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures of Rebecca's children, along with a card that read, "Just a reminder of who needs you." It was a masterful guilt trip, and for a moment I wavered. But Derek reminded me of all the times I had been there for the kids, all the birthdays and school events and weeknight dinners when Rebecca needed a break. One trip didn't negate all of that love and support. The night before our departure, we turned off our phones completely. We packed our suitcases, confirmed our shuttle, and tried to focus on the adventure ahead rather than the storm of family disapproval we were leaving behind. As we fell asleep, I wondered if this trip would end up being worth all the emotional turmoil it had caused. Little did I know, the real confrontation was still to come. The morning of our departure felt surreal. I experienced a strange mixture of freedom and guilt. Derek sensed my conflict and squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We deserve this," he whispered as we joined the boarding line. I had decided to maintain radio silence with my family throughout our trip. It wasn't just about avoiding further conflict. It was about being fully present for this experience Derek and I had worked so hard to create. My family had made their feelings clear. Now it was time to focus on my marriage. As our plane lifted off, I felt a weight lifting too. 6 hours later, we landed in Honolulu, stepping out into warm, fragrant air that instantly transported us away from our troubles. Our hotel room overlooked Waikiki Beach, with a balcony perfectly positioned to watch the sunset. That first evening, sipping my ties and watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink, I felt the tension of the past 2 weeks begin to dissolve. To 5 amazing years, Derek toasted, clinking his glass against mine. And many more, I responded, trying to stay in the moment. But family has a way of intruding even when they're thousands of miles away. That night, as Derek slept peacefully beside me, I found myself wide awake, wondering if Rebecca had found alternative childcare. Were the kids okay? Had my parents returned early from Florida to help? The questions circled in my mind like restless birds. Our second day featured a snorkeling trip to Molokini Crater. Floating in crystal clear water, surrounded by tropical fish and coral formations, I momentarily forgot everything else. Derek, who had always wanted to see sea turtles in their natural habitat, beamed with childlike joy when one swam lazily past us. I captured the moment in my memory, knowing this was exactly why we had planned this trip. But back at the hotel, preparing for dinner, the guilt resurfaced. I found myself checking my email, half expecting to find news of some disaster back home. There was nothing from my immediate family, just a promotional email from the school district and a message from a college friend. The absence of communication was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. On our third day, we hiked to a waterfall in the lush interior of the island. The trail was challenging, muddy in spots from recent rain, but the destination was worth every difficult step. Standing under the thundering cascade, holding hands with Derek, I felt a profound connection to him and to the moment. This was what we had saved for, planned for, stood our ground for. "Thank you for fighting for this," Derek said, somehow reading my thoughts. "For fighting for us." That evening, however, curiosity got the better of me. While Derek was in the shower, I turned on my phone for the first time since leaving home. The notifications flooded in immediately: 27 text messages, 13 voicemails, and dozens of social media alerts. My stomach clenched as I scrolled through them. Most were variations on the same theme. How could I be so selfish, so heartless, so inconsiderate? There were guilt-inducing photos of the children looking sad, messages about how Rebecca was struggling to find affordable childcare, and vague references to family emergencies that needed my attention. But buried among them was a text from my friend Laura, who lived near Rebecca. "Just so you know," she wrote, "Rebecca found a sitter for the kids. Her interview is apparently only 2 days, not the whole week. Enjoy your trip, and don't worry." I turned off my phone before reading any more messages, but the damage was done. The brief peace I had found was shattered. That night, during our romantic dinner cruise, I struggled to focus on the beautiful coastline and gourmet meal. Derek noticed my distraction but didn't press for details. He simply held my hand a little tighter, anchoring me to the present moment. The rest of the trip followed a similar pattern. Moments of pure joy and connection interrupted by intrusive thoughts and worries about what awaited us back home. We swam with dolphins, attended a traditional luau, watched the sunrise from the summit of Haleakala, and walked hand in hand along moonlit beaches. Each experience was everything we had hoped for, yet shadowed by the knowledge that our return would bring confrontation. On our last night, sitting on our balcony and watching our final Hawaiian sunset, Derek finally broached the subject. "Whatever happens when we get home, I want you to remember this week," he said. "Remember that we have the right to prioritize our marriage. Remember how it feels when it's just the two of us, supporting each other without all the noise and demands." I nodded, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I just wish they could understand." "They might not," he said gently. "But that doesn't mean we're wrong." The return flight felt much longer than the outbound journey. As the California coastline came into view, my anxiety intensified. What would be waiting for us? How much damage had been done to my family relationships? Had I sacrificed lifelong bonds for a single week of happiness? When we finally arrived home, exhausted from the long flight, our mailbox was stuffed with envelopes. Mixed among the bills and advertisements were several cards from relatives. One from Aunt Linda contained a lengthy handwritten note about family loyalty. Another, from my parents, featured a photo of Rebecca's children on the front and a brief message inside. They missed you. We all did. The house was quiet and undisturbed, just as we had left it. We unpacked, started laundry, and tried to readjust to normal life. I returned to school the next day, where my students were eager to hear about Hawaii. Derek went back to the hospital, jumping straight into a busy shift in the emergency room. For 3 days, we almost believed we might avoid the confrontation altogether. Then, on Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. The insistent chiming of our doorbell at 8:30 on a Saturday morning was our first indication that the peaceful reprieve was over. Derek and I were enjoying a lazy breakfast, reminiscing about our favorite moments in Hawaii when the sound interrupted our conversation. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing on the porch, my father's posture rigid with tension. And behind them, holding the hands of her 3 children, was Rebecca. They found us, I said to Derek, trying for humor, but feeling my heart rate accelerate. He squeezed my shoulder supportively. We knew this was coming. Remember, we didn't do anything wrong. I took a deep breath and opened the door, plastering on a smile for the children's sake. Good morning. This is a surprise. Before I could invite them in, Rebecca pushed past me, the children trailing behind her. My parents followed, my father carrying a manila envelope that immediately set off warning bells in my mind. No one returned my greeting or commented on our tan skin and relaxed appearance. The atmosphere was thick with unresolved tension. Kids, why don't you go play in the backyard? Rebecca instructed, her voice falsely cheerful. 7-year-old Jacob looked uncertainly between the adults, sensing the tension, but 5-year-old Emma tugged him toward the back door, with 3-year-old Lily toddling after them. As soon as the glass door closed behind the children, Rebecca turned to me, her expression hardening. I hope you enjoyed your little vacation, Amanda. Because while you were sipping cocktails on the beach, I was dealing with a childcare nightmare. My father stepped forward, holding out the manila envelope. Rebecca has something to show you. Inside the envelope was a stack of papers. The top sheet was an invoice from a professional childcare service, with a total amount of $2,200 clearly marked in bold at the bottom. What is this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. This is what it cost me to hire professional help while you were off enjoying yourself, Rebecca snapped. Since you refused to help me with this critical job interview, I had no choice but to hire round-the-clock care for the children. And since this expense is entirely your fault, we think it's only fair that you reimburse me. I stared at her in disbelief, then looked to my parents, expecting them to recognize the absurdity of this demand. Instead, my mother nodded in agreement. If you had helped your sister as we raised you to do, she wouldn't have had this expense, Mom said. It's only right that you cover it. The audacity was breathtaking. For a moment, I couldn't even form words. Derek stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Rebecca, we're sorry you had unexpected childcare expenses, but they're not our responsibility. We had this trip planned for a year. You knew about it. The last-minute nature of your interview doesn't constitute an emergency on our part. My father bristled. Stay out of this, Derek. This is a family matter. Derek is family, I interjected, finding my voice. And he's right. This isn't our responsibility. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. Of course you'd say that. You've always been selfish, Amanda. Always thinking about yourself first. Do you have any idea what I went through because of you? I had to scramble to find childcare interview sitters, rearrange my entire schedule. The kids were confused and upset that their aunt didn't want to see them. That's not fair, I protested. You know I love spending time with the kids. But you can't expect me to cancel long-standing plans every time you have a last-minute situation. This wasn't just any situation, Rebecca countered, her voice rising. This was a critical job opportunity, a chance to provide better for my children. But you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? You and Derek with your perfect jobs and your perfect marriage and your perfect life. My mother put a hand on Rebecca's arm, ostensibly to calm her but really just passing the baton. Amanda, we're very disappointed in your choices. Family should always come first. Always. The fact that you chose a vacation over helping your sister in her time of need shows a concerning shift in your values. I felt my own anger rising now, fueled by the accumulated stress of the past weeks and the sheer injustice of their position. First of all, it wasn't just a vacation. It was our 5th anniversary trip that we've been planning and saving for over a year. Second, Rebecca knew about this trip for months. And third, according to my friend Laura, the interview was only for 2 days, not the entire week as Rebecca claimed. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly at the mention of Laura, but she recovered quickly. The main interview was 2 days. But there were follow-up meetings, plus I needed time to look at neighborhoods and schools in case I got the job. Did you get the job? Derek asked. A flicker of discomfort crossed Rebecca's face. They haven't decided yet. But that's not the point. The point is that Amanda abandoned me when I needed her most, and now there's a $2,000 bill that I can't afford to pay. My father stepped forward, his military bearing evident in his stance. Amanda, we raised you to understand that family takes care of family. Your sister needed you, and you weren't there. Actions have consequences, and in this case, the consequence is this bill. The conversation was going in circles, with everyone talking, but no one listening. I tried a different approach. Rebecca, I'm genuinely happy you had this interview opportunity, but I don't understand why it had to be scheduled during the exact week of our trip, or why you couldn't arrange childcare further in advance. Not everyone has the luxury of planning their entire life a year ahead, she shot back. Some of us have to take opportunities when they come. The discussion grew more heated. My mother brought up childhood incidents where she claimed I had been selfish. My father lectured about responsibility. Rebecca detailed all the hardships she had faced trying to arrange alternative childcare. Derek tried repeatedly to mediate, only to be shut down by my father. Throughout it all, I kept glancing at the backyard where the children played, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding inside. They were innocent in all this, caught in the crossfire of adult relationships and expectations. I loved those kids deeply, which made the situation all the more painful. The confrontation reached its climax when Rebecca, gesturing wildly to emphasize a point, knocked over a small glass figurine we had brought back from Hawaii. It shattered on the hardwood floor, the sound momentarily silencing everyone in the room. The figurine had been a sea turtle, chosen to commemorate Derek's joy at swimming with one during our trip. Rebecca looked briefly horrified, then quickly rearranged her expression to one of defiance. Well, at least you have plenty of souvenirs from your precious trip. Unlike me, who has nothing but a pile of bills and a missed opportunity. Something inside me shifted as I looked at the broken pieces of glass on the floor. It was as if I could suddenly see the entire situation with perfect clarity. Years of bending to family pressure, of prioritizing Rebecca's emergencies over my own needs, of allowing guilt to dictate my choices, all crystallized in that moment of destruction. The room fell silent as everyone sensed the change in me. And in that silence, I found the strength to speak my truth. I looked at the broken sea turtle figurine on the floor, fragments glinting in the morning sunlight streaming through our living room window. In that moment, something inside me became very still and very clear. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, measured, and completely unlike the defensive tone I had been using. I'm going to get a broom for this glass, I said quietly. When I come back, I'd like everyone to sit down so we can have a real conversation. The simple request, delivered without emotion, seemed to catch everyone off guard. My father opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it again. Rebecca crossed her arms defensively, but she didn't argue. My mother glanced anxiously between us, her peacekeeper instincts clearly sensing a shift in the dynamic. When I returned with the broom and dustpan, Derek had guided everyone to the dining room table. I carefully swept up every shard of the broken figurine, taking my time, using the simple task to organize my thoughts. When I finally joined them at the table, setting the dustpan aside to dispose of later, I felt strangely powerful. I want to start by saying that I love all of you, I began, making eye contact with each family member. I love Rebecca's children with all my heart. And because I love you, I've spent years trying to be the person you expect me to be, the reliable daughter, the supportive sister, the ever-available aunt. I've canceled plans, rearranged my schedule, and put my own needs last so many times I've lost count. I turned to Rebecca. When you had the flu last year and couldn't get out of bed for 3 days, who took the kids to school, made their meals, and helped with homework? When Emma needed her costume for the school play and you forgot until the night before, who stayed up until 2 a.m. sewing butterfly wings? When you needed to move apartments and couldn't afford movers, who took 2 days off work to help you pack and unpack? Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her chair but didn't respond. I did those things gladly because I love you and the kids. I never expected anything in return except basic respect. Respect for my time, my marriage, and my right to occasionally prioritize my own needs. I turned to my parents. Mom, Dad, when you taught me that family comes first, I don't think you meant that one person's needs should always trump everyone else's. I don't think you meant that marriage vows are less important than helping a sibling who has other options. And I don't think you meant that love and support should only flow in one direction. My father's posture remained rigid, but something flickered in his eyes. A brief acknowledgement that perhaps my words held some truth. The truth is, I continued, this wasn't about a job interview, was it, Rebecca? Her eyes widened slightly. A telltale sign I had hit a nerve. Laura didn't just tell me the interview was only 2 days. She also mentioned she saw you at Riverside Cafe last Saturday, having lunch with a man she didn't recognize. A lunch that lasted 3 hours, while your children were presumably with this expensive sitter you're now asking me to pay for. Color flooded Rebecca's cheeks. That's none of your business, she snapped. You're right, it's not. Who you date is entirely your business. But when you lie about a job interview to manipulate me and our parents, when you try to make me pay for childcare you needed for a date rather than a career opportunity, it becomes my business. My mother gasped softly. Rebecca, is this true? Rebecca's defiance crumbled slightly under our mother's gaze. The interview was real, she insisted. It just didn't take the whole week. And yes, I met someone recently. He's a really great guy, and I deserved a few days to get to know him without the kids around. Is that so terrible? It's not terrible to want a date, I said gently. What's terrible is lying about it, using your children as leverage, and then trying to make others feel guilty and responsible for your choices. I took a deep breath, knowing what I was about to say would change our family dynamic forever. I love you all, but I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm anymore. The phrase hung in the air, simple yet powerful. From now on, these are my boundaries. I will continue to be there for the kids and for all of you, but with advance notice and mutual respect. No more last-minute emergencies unless they're actual emergencies. No more guilt trips when I prioritize my marriage or my own well-being. And absolutely no more financial manipulation or demands. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. So that's it? You're just going to abandon your family when we need you? I'm not abandoning anyone, I replied calmly. I'm just requiring the same respect I've always given you. And if you can't provide that, then yes, I will limit my availability. This is ridiculous, Rebecca fumed. You've changed, Amanda. Hawaii has turned you into someone I don't even recognize. I have changed, I acknowledged. I've realized that loving someone doesn't mean letting them take advantage of you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own happiness to repeatedly bail them out of situations they create. My father cleared his throat. Amanda, while I understand you may feel taken for granted, family obligations don't simply disappear because they're inconvenient. You're right, Dad. Family obligations don't disappear. But they should be reciprocal. When was the last time Rebecca rearranged her life to help me? When was the last time any of you considered my needs with the same urgency you expect me to consider yours? The question was met with uncomfortable silence. Derek, who had been quietly supportive throughout, finally spoke. We value all of you. And we want healthy relationships with everyone in this family. But healthy relationships require mutual respect and boundaries. My mother, ever the peacemaker, attempted to find middle ground. Perhaps we all got a bit carried away. Rebecca, I think we need to talk about this job interview situation more. Amanda, surely you can understand why we were concerned when you suddenly blocked all communication. I understand your concern, I conceded. But I don't accept the way you expressed it. The constant guilt trips, the manipulation, the demands, none of that was reasonable or loving. Rebecca gathered her purse, her movements sharp with anger. Well, I can see this conversation is going nowhere. If you won't take responsibility for the childcare expenses you caused, then I guess I'll just have to figure it out myself. As usual. She moved toward the back door to collect her children, then turned back with a parting shot. Don't expect me to forget this, Amanda. When you need something someday, remember this moment. Derek stood up. I think it's time for everyone to leave. We've all said what we needed to say, and continuing this conversation right now won't be productive. My parents exchanged glances, clearly torn between following Rebecca and trying to smooth things over. In the end, family loyalty won out, as it always had. We'll talk more when everyone's calmer, my mother said, squeezing my hand as she passed. My father nodded stiffly, his military bearing never wavering even in emotional situations. As they filed out, Rebecca ushering her confused children to the car without allowing them to say proper goodbyes, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness at the rift, anger at the injustice. But underneath it all, a surprising sense of peace. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground with my family and spoken my truth without backing down. The house felt unusually quiet after they left. Derek wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, he whispered. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But it was necessary. As we cleaned up the remnants of the confrontation, I wondered what would happen next. Had I permanently damaged my relationship with my sister and parents? Would Rebecca follow through on her threat to cut me off? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The old pattern was broken, and whatever relationship we rebuilt would have to be founded on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. The broken sea turtle figurine, now wrapped carefully in tissue paper in the trash, seemed a fitting metaphor for this family turning point. Something had been shattered. But perhaps what would emerge from the fragments would be stronger and more authentic than what came before. The aftermath of the confrontation was exactly what I had feared, complete silence. For 2 weeks, my phone didn't ring with calls from my parents. No text messages from Rebecca. The family group chat remained dormant. It was as if I had suddenly ceased to exist in their world. Despite the rational understanding that I had done nothing wrong, the silence was painful. I had gone from daily contact with my family to nothing, and the void was disorienting. There were moments when I questioned my decision, wondering if standing my ground had been worth the cost. Maybe I was too harsh, I said to Derek one evening as we prepared dinner together. Maybe I should reach out and apologize. Apologize for what exactly? He asked gently. For having boundaries? For expecting to be treated with respect? You didn't do anything wrong, Amanda. Logically, I knew he was right. But family dynamics aren't governed by logic alone. They're shaped by years of patterns and emotional connections that run deeper than reason. The silence felt like punishment, and part of me still responded to it the way I had as a child, with the assumption that I needed to fix whatever was wrong. Dr. Matthews, my therapist, helped me process these feelings during our weekly sessions. What you're experiencing is the discomfort of change, she explained. For years, your role in the family has been clear. You're the reliable one, the fixer, the person who sacrifices to keep everyone else happy. Now you've changed the rules, and no one knows quite how to respond. Including me, I admitted. Including you, she agreed. Give it time. Healthy boundaries often meet resistance at first, but if the relationships are strong enough, they'll adjust to the new normal. 3 weeks after the confrontation, my mother sent a tentative text message, just checking in. Hope you're well. It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of what had happened. But it was a beginning. I responded with a brief update about work and an innocuous question about her garden, a shared interest that had always been safe territory. Our exchanges remained superficial for another week, gradually increasing in frequency and warmth. A month after the confrontation, my father called. Our conversation was awkward at first, with long pauses and careful navigation around sensitive topics. But as we talked about neutral subjects like his woodworking projects and the book I was currently reading, something shifted subtly. "Amanda," he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion, "I've been thinking about what you said. About respect going both ways. I may not have shown it well, but I've always respected you. You've always been someone I could count on." "I know, Dad," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "And I want to continue being someone you can count on. Just not at the expense of my own well-being." "I understand," he said. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Even if it was against me." It wasn't exactly an apology, but from my father. This acknowledgement was significant. A small crack in the wall of family expectations had formed, allowing a glimpse of a more balanced relationship. Rebecca's silence continued the longest. Her social media posts suggested she was conducting a campaign to position herself as the wronged party. Photos of the children with captions like, "Grateful for real family, who are always there for us," made their way back to me through mutual friends. She told stories at family gatherings we weren't invited to, stories that painted me as selfish and uncaring. But surprisingly, these tactics didn't have the effect she probably intended. Several relatives reached out to me privately, expressing concern about the situation, but also curiosity about my side of the story. My Aunt Patricia, always the family truth teller, called me directly. "Rebecca's been making some claims that don't sound like you," she said bluntly. "Care to fill me in on what really happened?" I gave her the unvarnished truth, including Rebecca's lie about the job interview. Aunt Patricia listened without interruption, then sighed heavily. "I've watched this dynamic play out for years," she said. "Your sister takes. You give. It was bound to reach a breaking point eventually. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. And I'm not the only one who thinks so." Her support was a balm to my wounded spirit. Confirmation that I wasn't crazy or selfish for establishing boundaries. Over the following weeks, other family members reached out with similar messages, creating a network of unexpected support. 2 months after the confrontation, my parents invited Derek and me to dinner. It was a tentative olive branch, and we accepted with cautious optimism. The evening was surprisingly pleasant, with everyone making a conscious effort to keep the conversation positive. Rebecca and her children weren't mentioned until dessert, when my mother broached the subject carefully. "Your sister is still upset," she said. "But I want you to know that your father and I have been talking about everything that happened. We may not have always been fair in how we handled things between you two." Coming from my mother, this was as close to an admission of fault as I was likely to get. I accepted it with grace, neither pushing for more nor dismissing the significance of her words. "I hope someday, Rebecca, and I can repair our relationship," I said honestly. "I miss the kids terribly." "They miss you too," Mom said. "Emma asked about you just last week, wondering when she would see her Aunt Amanda again." That night, I sent Rebecca a text, "I miss the kids. If you're open to it, I'd love to take them to the park sometime. No pressure, just an offer." She didn't respond immediately, and I didn't expect her to. But 3 days later, she replied, "Emma has a soccer game Saturday at 10. She'd probably like it if you came." It was a small opening, but I seized it gratefully. That Saturday, Derek and I cheered from the sidelines as Emma's team of 5-year-olds chaotically chased a soccer ball around a field. After the game, Emma ran to us with an unrestrained joy that only children can express, throwing her arms around my waist. "Aunt Amanda, did you see my goal?" "I did. You were amazing." I hugged her tightly, then greeted Jacob and Lily with equal enthusiasm. Rebecca stood at a distance, her body language still closed and defensive. But she had allowed this contact, this first step toward reconciliation. When I thanked her as we were leaving, she simply nodded. "They've missed you," she said, an echo of my mother's words, but carrying additional weight coming from her. Over the next few months, a new pattern slowly emerged. I saw the children regularly but on clearly defined terms, usually for specific activities or events rather than last-minute babysitting. My relationship with my parents strengthened as we learned to communicate more honestly, with less manipulation and more direct expression of needs and feelings. Rebecca and I maintained a polite distance, civil for the sake of the children but not close. 6 months after our confrontation, however, something unexpected happened. I received a text from her late one evening. "You were right about that guy I was seeing when you were in Hawaii. Total disaster. Promised a lot, delivered nothing. Guess my judgment still needs work." It was as close to an admission of wrongdoing as Rebecca had ever offered. I responded with sympathy rather than an "I told you so," and for the first time in months, we had a genuine conversation. It wasn't an apology or a complete reconciliation, but it was a crack in her armor, a small acknowledgement that perhaps I hadn't been entirely wrong. The most profound change, however, wasn't in my relationships with my family, but in my relationship with myself. Standing firm in that confrontation had shown me a strength I hadn't fully recognized before. The ability to set boundaries, to value my own needs and happiness, to expect respect rather than simply hoping for it, these were powerful tools I now carried into every aspect of my life. My marriage to Derek grew stronger as we navigated this family transformation together. He had always seen the strength in me, even when I couldn't see it myself. His unwavering support had given me the courage to break unhealthy patterns and establish new, healthier ones. That broken sea turtle figurine became a symbol for us. Derek found an artist who created a more beautiful replacement, but we kept a small piece of the original in a tiny box as a reminder. Sometimes things need to break before they can be remade into something better. The lesson I carry forward is this: true love, whether in family or marriage, never requires self-erasure. It thrives on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and the understanding that everyone's needs matter equally. Learning to say no to those we love most isn't a rejection of them, but an affirmation of ourselves. And ultimately, it creates relationships that are authentic, balanced, and genuinely nurturing. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were used to you always saying yes? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, prioritizing your well-being isn't selfish, it's essential. Because we can't truly be there for others until we learn to be there for ourselves.